weird.
Okay.
Which we that could be our podcast. Wow, we just made that person feel weird. I'm going to start off by saying hello. Thank you, friends, so much for joining us, Space Makers, to the Making Spaces podcast. I am Sarah Heath, and this is my amazing co-host,
Josie, again in the house.
Josie is still here. This is a podcast about making space both literally and figuratively for people and for yourself. And so the idea of not just design, but how do we create community? How do we create spaces for ourselves and other people to live and dwell in? And so today we have Carly, and you want to give a little bit of a background, Josie, on who Carly is?
Yes, Mom.
My gosh.
I just like that you tell me to do it, you know?
I just like to it's like a hint. It's like a little like, Josie, do you want to? I guess that is kind of a mom thing. You know, I'm a passive aggressive mom. Things you learn. I'll write that down, my therapist, and I can work through that. Keep going.
I
did it again.
Okay, back to Carly.
Carly, yeah, thank you.
Is an amazing branding expert all about authentic branding. She runs I always get this wrong. Whole Media Co.
Whole Co Media.
Dang it. Okay, I always do that. It's always one or the other in my head. She runs, I forgot it again. Anyways, Carly.
Whole Co Media.
Yes, good job, Sarah. Thank you.
Sleep deprived Josie.
It's fine. It's fine. Carly, okay, so tell us a little bit more in your own words, Carly.
So I basically, my big why, I guess, and what I'm doing is I help people see themselves and therefore authentically be themselves in their business. I am a big believer that there are, tried and true strategies and systems that help you build a successful business, but if you try to fit yourself into that box, it just isn't going to work in your business that you went into theoretically to find freedom and abundance and joy and all of that won't feel good. And so I do, it's actually kind of my magic sauce that I merge people's authentic kind of core being into these strategies and structures and then help them build a business that then feels really fun for them because they get to work out of their strengths and be who they are instead of trying to be someone that they're not just in order to find some, societally defined version of success. So
that's amazing. We always put the poor guest in a hot seat before we ask the really pressing questions. We ask, what is one of your favorite spaces and why? And you can define space however you want, like however loosely you want to define it. You can define space as like, an actual literal space, or it can be like, I like, the space of silence or whatever it might be.
Okay. I won't go that poetic.
Some people have.
I believe it, and I love when people do that. But my answer, honestly, is I lived in Australia for a few years, and I'm still planning on going back when borders reopen. And there is this beautiful waterfall in the Blue Mountains, and I think it's called Ku-ring-gai National Park. And this waterfall is probably the size of a skyscraper, and you like hike up to it and then you watch it, like you're up at the top of it and then you get to hike down to the bottom, and it's like an all-day experience. But anyway, it is just the most surreal place to be, and when you're looking at it from the top, you can only see half of it, so you don't even realize like how fully amazing it is until you're at the bottom and looking all the way up at it.
So it's a bit of a surprising spot. So it's like, it's beautiful, and then it's even more beautiful.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
I love that. So you work with companies and people working on, is it mainly entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I work primarily with what I call early entrepreneurs. So I work with people who are wanting to, I'm so sorry. Apparently the gardeners just got here.
That's okay. We can't hear it. You're good.
Okay.
Just keep going. You're safe.
Sorry. So I work primarily with early entrepreneurs. So people who are individual entrepreneurs, so solopreneurs, but are wanting to hopefully then, bring in a team eventually to help them kind of scale. But I get them right at the very beginning of their entrepreneurial journey.
That's awesome. And what do you think is like the biggest hang up for people who like, I think sometimes when you try to tell people just be authentically you, everyone says, well,
Yeah.
isn't that just like an automatic? Aren't we all just always being our authentic selves? What do you think I don't know, Josie, I don't know grammar. What do you think is the biggest hang up for folks and why they don't like kind of rest or nest in their authentic selves?
Honestly, it's the cheesy rhetoric of be yourself. I think
Right.
that's what often like pushes people away from it, is they're like, well, duh, I'm myself. And then they think, okay, well, I have to be myself because it's so obvious. That's what everyone says that I'm supposed to do. But they never then actually take the time to look at, well, what does that mean? And who am I actually? And then also there's so much fear the moment that they do start, looking at, like, asking those deep questions. There's so much fear that that person isn't enough. And well, if I am that person, then I won't be good enough. And then I won't be able to succeed. And so it's just this like slippery slope of, the expectations, but then also the fear. And then just really what it comes down to is a really internalized limiting belief, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, how relatable in the age of the curated Instagram with these models with the Facetune and the
Literally.
people acting like they're being authentic, and then, oh, actually, you see them in person and they're a completely different human being.
Like they look totally different.
Yeah.
I haven't had that experience. Have you, either of you, really had that experience where you've seen someone who...
I haven't had it with like that kind of experience, but I do have that experience within particularly the entrepreneurship world where people are like, my business is so good and everything's going so great. And then you hear them like a year later be like, yeah, my business was awful at that time and I like wasn't making any money. And, and it's like, what are you selling here? You're trying to be this successful business owner, but then you're not. And it's like a really shame-based cycle of trying to be that person when you're not actually.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's like, yeah. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask, why do you think it's so important to truly step into authenticity, like in the terms of making space?
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about this because I was listening to some of your guys' podcast episodes earlier, and I was.
Oh, I like that plug. Keep going.
But no, really thinking like about the work that I do in terms of making space, and I think honestly, when we show up as who we authentically are, we create space for other people to do the same thing, and it's really hard to be the first person to do it. Obviously, you're not ever the first person to do it. Someone else in the world has shown up authentically, but the first person within maybe your community, or it feels like within your industry or something like that. But the moment that it happens, everyone else takes a big sigh of relief because they're like, oh, finally, I get to just be myself. I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to put this act on anymore. And so I think that's really where the concept of making space ties in so beautifully with this idea of showing up as your authentic self within your business.
Now, how do you do that? I know one of the things that people often talk about is like, I want my team, or I want people to feel like I know what I'm doing. And so sometimes people pair authenticity with like, I'm going to show all my faults. I remember Brene Brown being like, guys, you're misreading my authenticity stuff if you think your first meeting is when you come in and say, these are all the things I am horrible at. Because that doesn't help. Like if you're in a team meeting, although I feel like I do that to you all the time, Josie. But you don't want people to like come in and just say, these are all the things I am horrible at. Or the ship is going down, the business isn't doing well. Like, how do you balance that idea of authenticity that in a way isn't like self-deprecating to the point of like, you actually create the scenario you're most afraid of? So I think about, you're trying to get people to buy into your business. Well, if you walk in, you're like, I don't know, we're not really doing well. Like sort of what are the brackets around authenticity that you feel like are helpful within business or when you're trying to start or launch something?
Yeah. Well, I think it's so interesting how all of our brains immediately go with authentic. Like the moment we think about authenticity, we think negative. We think we have to be vulnerable in a negative way, like about all of our weaknesses. when in reality, authenticity can be about coming in and saying, this is what I'm really damn good at. Sorry, I forgot the no cursing rule.
We don't have that one. I don't know if you know,
okay.
can see her shirt. It literally says damn on it.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
There is not a no cussing rule. We
Okay.
tried that, but then we have a rotating guest who's on often is my friend Kevin, and they don't not cuss. That's just not, and talk about authenticity. Like, I was not going to ask Josie to come on a show and be like, Josie, you have to only say things about flowers and puppies.
Yeah, I have a potty mouth, as my dad would say.
Perfect. Okay. Good.
You can say you're damn good at something is all I'm saying.
Perfect. So yeah, why can't authenticity be from a positive perspective of I'm really good at this thing, and here are my strengths, and here is what makes me unique, and all of that. And so I think often we equate authenticity with putting ourselves in a position of weakness and of owning our weaknesses, which is so important. But you don't have to come in and say, I'm really bad at this, I'm really bad at that, I'm really bad at that, just to be authentic. You can come in and say, I'm really good at this. This is my secret sauce. This is, why I'm here in the world. I'm super good at helping this kind of person. And then that's being authentic as well. It's more standing in your power than it is disempowering yourself.
Oh, I love that. I think that's a great point that has happened with the authenticity movement.
Right, especially in the age of people realizing that you don't have to do everything alone. You can delegate, but part of delegating is knowing what you're good at first and then saying, okay, but I'm not that good at making graphic design graphics, so you do it.
I feel personally attacked. I'm just kidding. Josie, who gets calls from me the other day I learned about Photoshop layers. I nearly called you at midnight. Josie.
Oh, I was asleep.
There are layers. And if you click on one and it's below, you can't tell you clicked on it. And she would have been like, okay, champ. I think there is this beautiful thing about making space for people's strengths. We are 3 women on this call today. I think sometimes we've been told that authenticity about our strengths is problematic. And I think it comes off as, for oftentimes, I hope it's shifting a little bit. Men can come off as, I know my strengths, and it's considered, Josie, give me an adjective.
Powerful.
Powerful, right? Or man, that person is assertive, but assertive isn't a bad thing. But if you put the word assertive on a woman, she's bossy, right? So I think allowing people to step into their strengths in a way that is not open space for it not to be intimidating per se, but inspiring. Anyone have thoughts on that? Because as you were speaking, I was just like, oh yeah, I think it'd be great to walk into something about my strengths, but then immediately that thing in my head goes, nobody wants you to do that,
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times, even within my own parental units, they're like, you need to really not talk about yourself like that, because people are going to think that you're a really weird and rude person, because all I say is oh, well, I'm a good photographer, or I can do that, or I'm good at this, or I'm good at that. All of a sudden I'm the arrogant asshole because I know what I'm good at.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Josie, is I've always really admired how confident you are with what you're good at. And that's something that, honestly, I guess I could say you've made that space for me, and I'm sure for so many other women as well, seeing how confident you are with just yeah, I'm a damn good photographer. Okay, I make earrings now. Great, and you're creating that space for people like me who, the me during college when we were going to school together versus the me now are 2 completely different people in so many ways. But, I remember being that person and seeing you being so confident and just honestly thinking, man, that would be nice, because here I was stuck in myself, And so I think, Sarah, to your point, often we are afraid that other people will perceive us that way. And maybe there will be some people, but think about the silent majority of people who will be perceiving you in a way of, wow, I am so that's amazing that she's doing that.
Right. And that space opening, like you said, oh, it's inviting someone else into their own strengths. and when you look at a business, I think they're oftentimes have either of you guys ever bought something because you're like, I don't know that I necessarily need this, but this, I believe in this thing they're doing. Like you buy a product, they're shaking your head. You can't tell if you're listening to the podcast. You can if you're watching YouTube. Here's a plug for check out both. I think there is like, I have a friend who owns a candle company. If you look around my home, I have zero needs for candles. Like I'm a very minimalist designer. Don't like to have a bunch of clutter, but I love candles. So I have candles all over my home. I don't need any more candles, but their company and what they do with it and how it's empowering for people. Like it's just this beautiful thing that you buy something, even if you're like, I don't need that, but I need that.
Yeah, totally. And I think, we're moving into an interesting time with, our buying habits where people are now more and more buying because they align with a business's values or they align with their mission more than just I'm buying because I want to buy. Like, you look at the sustainable ethical clothing movement, you look at so many different kinds of niche products that have cropped up over the recent years. It's all we're purchasing because we believe in the vision that business is casting and we want that. And it's like, I will spend the extra money on that because I believe in the vision. Or like you, I don't actually need a candle, but I really believe in the vision. So I want to help and I want to invest. And it's our way, I think, of stepping into something that feels bigger than us and feeling like we're making a difference in the world. And also at the same time, having a fun little candle in our home that smells nice now, but always reminds us that we have a space in the world that we contributed to.
Yeah, and to your credit, Carly, I mean, a lot of us are kind of anti-Amazon now, even if we still buy because it's really difficult not to buy from Amazon. But you're kind of making a space for that ethical capitalism ideal, right? Mm-hmm. Of going back to the mom and pop shop because people are being their authentic selves. They're not selling you the lifestyle anymore. They're selling you on, do you believe in this? And I've always said, I want you to tell me if this person is problematic because I vote with my wallet and I don't want to buy from them,
Yes. Yeah, totally. And I think it's so fun too, because, the supporting the mom and pops, the supporting the individual. I don't work with any people who, I don't know, when I hear mom and pop, I think often like much older population, and none of my clients have been, not that I'm not open to it. I'd love to work with more older people as well. But a lot of my clients have been like in the 30 to 40 range and, looking at
really
them,
young, really
super young.
Yeah. So young. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So much life ahead of them, right? And they have so much opportunity to build something beautiful. But yeah, it's exciting to think about how that person, if you invest in their business, you're investing in their like immediate community, which is then making a huge difference in their immediate community. And that's how we, make big changes in the world. It's not, okay, I'm deciding not to, I don't know, use a takeout cup at Starbucks or something like that. Yeah, of course, sure, that's helpful.
I don't think we can do that anymore, guys, but they did. Starbucks did get rid of their straws, which I think is huge in the midst of COVID. Yeah, they got rid of, you can no longer get a straw at Starbucks.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started on the waste that is coming out of COVID. It's ridiculous.
I know.
But what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's real bad. How do you begin this process of having people self-reflect? And you don't have to give away, as you call it, your secret sauce, but I'm just thinking as people are like, oh yeah, I want to do this in my own, whatever it might be. And they may not be entrepreneurs. They might even be like, I help a lot of churches, believe it or not, design their spaces. So like communities, how do they start to get into like who they authentically are? What are some steps or thoughts that you have around that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So my favorite way of helping people get to know themselves is asking them the same question in multiple ways. So, I will ask them questions like, what inspires you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? But then I'll also ask them the question, if you had a storefront for your business, what would it look like? How would it feel? Who would come? And from both of those questions, even though they're different questions, they're getting at the same idea of what's your brand personality.
Got it.
And so when I ask them multiple questions and they seem kind of frou-frou questions, like, that's easy. Oh yeah, I can imagine my dream storefront. But when they kind of take the pressure off themselves, because I don't go into it saying we're going to figure out who you are at your core, because that would be really intimidating. But take the pressure off, and they can figure it out, and they can just give their first answer, and that answer is usually what's actually true to them, and then we just dig deeper into that.
So that's like actually the secret of the question that I ask at the beginning. And I had a guest figure that out pretty quick. Like, you ask about spaces because you're trying to figure out who we are, right? So I want an audience to get to know someone really quick. So I ask about the space, and you can find out like friends of mine who are like my friend who's super like cerebral and very in his head. And his answer was, I like the spot of I like the space when people are actively listening. Right? Which is like, most people are like, I really like, this place in Italy. Someone said that. So what would I find out about the person who said Italy? They like aesthetics and outside stuff, like outside of their being. Whereas this person likes the interpersonal. So like, you can get so into people simply by asking questions. I think that's something we've kind of lost that skill a little bit.
I agree. I'd love to hear what you learned from my answer about me.
Oh, I think I wouldn't have assumed that you're someone who travels internationally. Like, you just don't know that, right? So there's an adventuresome side. But I also, as I heard you talk about, I like to hike this thing, and it's great and it's wonderful, and then it's even better. So from you saying that, what I hear is an optimistic person who like sees a space that's great, and then I see it's even better. So that's what I got out of that. Josie, any thoughts on Josie, as I'm being your mom again? Hey, Josie, what do you think?
I know that you frequent Australia and have lived there. But I also know that you're very adventurous, and that kind of solidified that to me. Because some people are adventurous in the sense that they like to travel in general, but not a lot of people like to do the day hike to a waterfall and then keep on hiking and then for the payoff at the end, but you're willing to work through the adventure to get to the best part.
Wow.
So it's like,
I told so much.
I think that's like I think why I say it's a skill that I feel like we've lost is I think we've lost the skill of knowing ourselves well enough to know the space that we inhabit, to be able to like sit with someone in their space and ask about their space or their humanity or who they are. And I think this show, if anything, has been about learning great questions, because people will ask us questions back. In fact, we did an interview this morning, and he asked a question back, and he was like, is that okay? But that is, how do we, if there's not mutuality in space making, then you're just doing it at someone. You're not engaging, right? And I think when you're asking your clients all these questions, you're getting into the core of them in a way that they may not even be aware. And they might have, if you weren't doing that, I feel like they'd have blockades. Don't you feel like they would have oh, the answer I should say is this, because I'm really into shoes, because their company's about shoes, right? And they know that they're supposed to tell you they're really about shoes, but maybe they're not actually really about shoes. They're about what the shoe does for people, or things like that. So I love a good question asker.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think, that is that concept that you were just talking about, how people, maybe they have a shoe business and their answer is supposed to be shoes. That's what they love, It's never actually about the thing in anything that we do. It's never about just the thing. There's always something else that is motivated by desire for the thing.
Right.
And that's actually part of what I also work with my clients on building, is what's called their brand story. And so you think about any sort of story and you think, the classic boy meets girl story. The boy wants to date the girl. She's super popular. Maybe he gets bullied, classic tropes here. And in the movie, it's all about how he wants to date the girl. But at the end of the movie, even if he doesn't end up dating the girl, he gets what he really wants, which is to be accepted for who he is.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of some of the work of like Donald Miller or like story theory.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I wrote 2 books on this stuff because I'm super into it.
Oh, did you? Nice. Okay.
My one book's called The Authenticity Challenge, and the other one's called What's Your Story? So you are right up my alley.
Wow. I will have to look those up. Good to know. And thank you for plugging them. Everyone else that's listening, go buy Sarah's book.
Oh, you do not have to. They're on Amazon, so that upsets Josie. I didn't put them there. My publisher did. It's also on their website, Cokesbury or Abington Press. But I think I love hearing the idea that the thing is never the thing you want, right? Because I think we are in the midst of, I hate unprecedented, guys, it's precedent, it's happened. But you know what I mean? We're in this like time where we're starting to see that the thing was never the thing, right? All our hopes, our dreams, our desires, all these things. And then we have these space makers or people who are able to say like, maybe that's not actually the thing you wanted in the first place. So you lost the thing and you feel devastated. So a lot of people are, the job they've trained for no longer exists or isn't what they thought it was going to be. And then you feel stuck. So if that was the only thing you were chasing after, what does life look like if it isn't about something more? I mean, one of the things I love about having a friendship with Josie is it's never about money for Josie. It's always about what is it doing? You know, what is it? Like even you said her earring, I just recorded a commercial for your earrings because I think they're amazing, but they're made out of, you know, not found, but repurposed leather. And so it's this idea of salvaging things. And for her, working with her hands and creating this thing it's about beautification, but it's more than that. It's about reusing things and not wasting. It's all these different layers. And you can't get to that with, tell me what you do, which is the question we ask, right?
Totally.
Yeah. And I think this whole COVID situation is really brought about a time that I'm really excited about because I've always been trying to tell people, like, you can work for the money, but it's not going to make you happy. And sure, statistically, a little bit of money does make you happier, right? Because your life is easier.
A little bit.
People but it's like 75 grand a year, 70, yeah, whatever. And now people are realizing that they work from home, which is difficult for a lot of people, or their children aren't home, or they lost their job and they have to cope. They realize that the job was not making them happy in the first place. The pursuit of this quote unquote success was not making them happy. So now, I mean, a lot of people aren't concerned with the corporate life anymore. Lots of Etsy stores have popped up, lots of new hobbies, which is super exciting. Even if they are my competition, but just kidding, I don't compete. It's just fun because I that's what I've always been really passionate about, is getting people to know that like this corporate lifestyle and the 40 hours a week is not gonna make you feel like your best self.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, even if you want to continue working for the man in a big business or something, that's fine. But I think what this time has shown a lot of people is, but wait, I can have a life outside of that. Mm-hmm. I don't have to do the 40 hours plus 2 hours of a commute every day, 2 hours minimum, usually of a commute every day. And then just live for the weekends where I'm exhausted and do my household chores and meal prepping. You know, it's really shown people, okay, yeah, I can still work for these bigger businesses, but I can do it at my house and I can go on a walk during lunch and I don't have to be commuting back and forth every day and spending all of this time, again, doing something I don't love. Or if they are realizing, wow, I don't actually enjoy this job at all, then now is kind of an opportunity to say, okay, well, what do I actually want from my life? And what was I trying to achieve in this job? Because more often than not, it was status or social acceptance or, you know, like money or something like that. And realizing, was that actually what I needed? Is that what I wanted? Or was I just chasing that because that's what I was taught that I needed to chase?
Yeah, it's knowing whether you were told the story or whether the story is yours.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think that's a big part of the branding piece that you're doing. And it's not so funny. Like I almost feel like every human should have to go through a branding thing, not because I think you have to like put forward your best self, but to know your best self.
Yeah.
Right? Like so that you can identify when the story you're being told is a false one. Because what is advertising other than trying to tell you a story about yourself or what you need or what you're missing? Like when I'll never forget the moment I realized that advertising was really about telling me what was missing in my life.
Yeah, and it's a shocking realization. It's like, oh, that's the reason it works, is because it's making me feel bad about myself.
Yeah. Not because it's necessarily painting right. It's not necessarily painting a picture of like something that would add to my life. So my life is already assumed not to be good. And I work in an industry where we've got the answer to your life. We start out by telling you your life isn't good. But if you just do these couple of things and come and hang out with us, your life will feel better, versus saying your life on a base level is already beloved, is already great. Now you might have issues within it and all this sort of stuff, but like your natural state when you are your most authentic self is really good. And any deviance from that is what feels not good. Right. So the harmful things in our lives or whatever it might be, but I think it's not as easy to sell that. And so the beauty is having a bunch of people who are themselves in a way that's really holistic. And I love the name of your company, even if she can't remember it, because it is about wholeness. Is it about wholeness? Is that what the name is? I'm assuming that was what it had to do with.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can tell you a little story about that, I guess. But,
please, we love a story. We love a story.
So, when I was at school, at APU,
September's APU month, by the way, guys. All of our episodes that we've recorded in September have been APU people, and that was just by accident. Just the scheduling worked out that way.
Well, apparently we're just marketing for them.
Azusa Pacific will hate this because there's a lot of cussing.
And we might have some challenging beliefs about some things that happen there. But anyway.
Gosh, you're a good storyteller. I'm excited. Go.
No, but actually, this is a good story about my being there, because I had a art professor actually who I wasn't an art major. I wish I would have done that. It would actually be more aligned with what I'm doing now than political science, my real major. But anyway, so I had an art professor, and we had an assignment of doing a self-portrait. It didn't have to look like us. It just had to represent us in some way. And so I drew like a portrait, a side outline of a woman's face. And on the inside, I wrote, not enough, not enough, not enough, not enough. On the outside, I wrote, too much, too much, too much, too much. And as I was creating this piece,
dang.
Right? Yeah. And I actually wasn't even conscious that I was doing this in the moment. Like, I was just trying to be my most authentic self. And as I was creating it, I like kept adding things to it, and like, oh, there's too much now. But then I would look at it again and be like, there's not enough on there. So then I'd add more. And so I was literally living this battle, right? And I went and showed it to my art professor, and I was like, I hate this. I hate it. It's horrible. This is, like, I can't figure out what to do. It's due soon. So I'm going to try and start something new, but I can't decide. And he just paused for a moment, and then he looked at me and he was like, I think you don't like it because it's true.
Ooh, hoo, hoo.
Yeah. And so then I obviously started crying.
Obviously.
And so he challenged me to find a new word for enough, because enough is a value judgment, but and anyone can therefore say you are or are not enough. And so then I took the next week, figured out my word, and my word was whole, because either you have a whole pie or you don't have a whole pie. There's no questions there. You can't, no one can say anything differently. And so that is kind of the word that I've used to define myself, of this is who I am. I am a whole human being. And with that comes all of the good and all of the bad and everything in between. And then when I was thinking about starting my business and thinking about the kind of people I wanted to work with, what I wanted to do, it just seemed kind of the natural word to put with it. And it's so fun to see how it's evolved as I have evolved, and how that word, the definition of that word, has evolved over the past probably 5 years or so now since that first moment. So
do you feel like it's evolved in a cultural sense, or do you feel like it's evolved personally for you?
I think it's evolved personally for me, but I also think that it's evolved in a cultural sense as well. There's so many people using that word whole now, or holistic. And this was all happening in my life originally back when Brene Brown like first kind of like became a huge phenomenon, you know?
Saint Brene, as I call her. Yeah.
Yes. And
our patron saint of honesty.
Yes. But yeah, so that I think the timing of everything has definitely aligned where it's evolved for me personally, but it's also definitely been a word that's evolving in culture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it has been incredible to hear from you. We always sort of wrap things up with the conversation by asking, what is like one tangible thing if someone wants to make space for themselves or like or other people, if that would be something you would think of, what would be like one tangible thing you would share with someone as a way of making space for themselves or others, and take it in whatever vague way you want to?
Okay. I think it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of, if you just take that first step to allow yourself to be who you really are, to be your, authentic self, then you create space for other people to do the same. And again, it doesn't have to mean that you come in and say, I am horrible at this, or I, am an awful person in this way. You can just come in and say, like Josie, I'm a really damn good photographer. And then that creates space for other people to have that.
So what are you really damn good at?
I am really damn good at seeing people for who they are.
I love that.
So that's my thing.
Well, this has been incredible. It has been wonderful to chat with you. As always, thank you so much, friends, for listening. We would love for you to check us out. What are the ways and places and spaces where we can find you, Carly?
So I am at Whole Co Media. That's on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest. And that's WHOLECO Media, MEDIA, and also wholecomedia.com.
Awesome. And Josie, where are the spaces and places they can find us?
Thanks, Matt. You can find us on Instagram at Making Spaces Podcast. You can email us if you love us or hate us at makingspacespodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on almost any podcast platform, unless you like the really weird ones, then don't at me.
I found it. Somebody reposted us on Twitter with one that I'd never heard of.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I was like, oh, we're on that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You learn something new every day.
Literally wherever you get your podcast, rate, review, subscribe. That might be the YouTube thing, but you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/RevSarahHeath.
Please leave us a message. You can go to www.anchor.fm//making spaces and leave us a message about where your favorite space is and why, because we would love to include you in a coming up show. I think those are all of our housekeeping.
I think so. So see you next week.
We'll be saving a space for you.
Bye.
Thanks so much.